My name is Vernon, and I'm 54 years old. For 3 decades, I thought I was doing everything right as a father. I worked hard, sacrificed my dreams, and gave my family everything they needed. But one Friday evening, my daughter looked me in the eyes and said, "Shut up, Dad. Nobody cares for you." Those 7 words shattered everything I believed about my life. I stood up from that dinner table, grabbed my car keys, and walked out the door. I never came back. If you've ever felt invisible in your own home, you'll understand what happened next. Before I tell you the rest, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. And if this story already resonates with you, hit that subscribe button, because what I'm about to share isn't just about one terrible dinner. It's about years of slowly disappearing in plain sight, and how I finally chose to save myself. Now let me take you back to the beginning. I met Sarah 32 years ago at a community college in Portland, Oregon. She was studying to become an elementary school teacher, and I was finishing my degree in construction engineering. We fell in love fast, the kind of love that feels easy and right. We got married a year later in a small ceremony at her parents' house. Sarah wore a simple white dress, and I wore the only suit I owned. We couldn't afford much, but we didn't care. We had each other, and that felt like enough. 3 years into our marriage, Emma was born. I still remember holding her for the first time in that hospital room. She was so tiny, barely 7 pounds, with a full head of dark hair and these bright blue eyes that seemed to look right through me. Sarah was exhausted but glowing, and I made a silent promise to that little girl. I promised I would always be there for her, no matter what. And I kept that promise. Every single day, for 29 years. I worked as a construction engineer, spending long hours at building sites across the city. The work was tough, physically demanding, and the hours were brutal. I'd leave the house before sunrise, and often wouldn't get home until after dark. But I never complained because I knew I was building a life for my family. Every paycheck went toward our small house in the suburbs, toward groceries, toward Emma's clothes and toys, and later her education. On weekends, when other guys from work were out fishing or watching football at bars, I was home with my girls. I taught Emma how to ride a bike when she turned 5. I can still picture her wobbling down our driveway, her training wheels barely touching the ground, screaming with delight. When she finally got her balance and rode on her own for the first time, she turned back to look at me, with the biggest smile I'd ever seen. Every night for 15 years, I read Emma bedtime stories. We went through every book in the children's section of our local library. Goodnight Moon, Where the Wild Things Are, Charlotte's Web. She'd curl up next to me, her head on my shoulder, and I'd read until her breathing slowed and she drifted off to sleep. Those were the moments I lived for. I became the neighborhood fix-it guy. When our kitchen faucet started dripping, I fixed it. When the back fence broke during a storm, I rebuilt it. When Sarah's car wouldn't start on a cold winter morning, I was out there with my tools getting it running again. I took pride in being able to solve problems, to make things work, to keep our home running smoothly. I never missed Emma's school events. Not once. I sat through every school play, every choir concert, every awards ceremony. I remember one particular spring when Emma was in 4th grade. She had a small part in the school's production of The Wizard of Oz. She played a munchkin and only had 2 lines, but I took the afternoon off work to be there. When she spotted me in the audience, her face lit up and she gave me a little wave. After the show, she ran into my arms and said, "You came, Daddy," as if there was ever any doubt. For 13 years, I drove Emma to school every single morning. We'd leave the house at 7:15, and I'd drop her off before heading to whatever job site I was working on. Those car rides were our time. We'd talk about her friends, her teachers, her worries about upcoming tests. Sometimes we'd just listen to music together. She introduced me to bands I'd never heard of, and I'd tell her about the classic rock I grew up with. We had this thing where we'd sing along to the radio, both of us completely off-key, laughing at how terrible we sounded. Summer vacations were sacred in our family. Every year we'd pack up the car and drive to Crater Lake for a week of camping. We'd pitch our tent near the water, spend our days hiking and swimming, and our nights roasting marshmallows over the campfire. Emma loved those trips. She'd collect pine cones and interesting rocks, and I'd help her identify different types of trees and birds. Sarah would bring her guitar, and we'd sing songs under the stars. I can still remember the Sunday mornings when Emma was little. The three of us would wake up slowly, no alarms, no rush. We'd all gather in the kitchen, and we'd make pancakes together. Emma would stand on a step stool next to me, and I'd let her pour the batter onto the griddle. She'd watch with fascination as the bubbles formed on the surface, waiting for the perfect moment to flip them. Sarah would set the table with our mismatched plates and the syrup we'd bought from a farm stand. Those mornings felt perfect, unhurried and warm. When Emma got accepted to the University of Washington, I cried. Not in front of her, but later that night alone in the garage. I was so proud I could barely breathe. She'd worked hard all through high school, maintained a 3.7 grade point average, been involved in student government and volunteer work. That acceptance letter represented everything Sarah and I had hoped for our daughter. It meant she'd have opportunities we never had. But college was expensive. Even with some financial aid, we were looking at tens of thousands of dollars in costs. So I took on extra projects at work. I said yes to every overtime opportunity that came my way. I worked Saturdays when I should have been resting. My back started hurting more, and I developed headaches from long days in the sun. But I didn't care. This was for Emma. This was what fathers did. I turned down 3 different job offers during those years. Good offers, too. Management positions that would have meant more money and less physical labor. But they all required relocating to different cities. One was in Seattle, another in Sacramento, and the third in Denver. Any of them would have been a step up in my career. But Emma was settled here. She had friends, she knew her school, and I couldn't imagine uprooting her life for my career. So I stayed. I kept working the same job, doing the same demanding physical work, because I thought that's what being a good father meant. Putting your family first. Always. Emma graduated 3 years ago with a degree in communications. Sarah and I drove up to Seattle for the ceremony. I wore the same suit I'd worn to our wedding, now a bit tighter around the middle, but still serviceable. I watched Emma walk across that stage in her cap and gown, and my chest swelled with pride. She'd done it. We'd done it. All those years of sacrifice had led to this moment. After graduation, Emma moved back home. She said she needed time to find the right job, something in her field that would be fulfilling and well-paying. Sarah and I were thrilled to have her back. The house had felt too quiet with just the 2 of us. We cleaned out her old bedroom, which we'd been using for storage. I spent a whole weekend repainting the walls the soft lavender color Emma had always loved. Sarah bought new curtains and a cozy reading chair. We wanted Emma to feel welcome, to know that this would always be her home. Those first few weeks after Emma returned were nice. She seemed happy to be back, sleeping in late, catching up with old high school friends who still lived in the area. She'd come down for breakfast and tell us stories about her college experiences. We'd all sit around the kitchen table like we used to, and it felt like old times. But gradually, things started to shift. Emma began spending more and more time in her room. She'd take her meals upstairs, saying she wanted to eat while watching something on her laptop. When I'd knock on her door to ask if she wanted to join us for dinner, she'd call out that she wasn't hungry, or she'd already eaten. The closed door became a wall between us. I tried to be understanding. Job hunting was stressful, I told myself. She was probably feeling discouraged, maybe even a bit lost. I remembered how overwhelming it had felt when I was her age, trying to figure out my path. So I gave her space, but I also tried to stay connected. One Saturday morning, I asked Emma if she wanted to go fishing with me, just like we used to do when she was younger. We had this spot about 30 minutes outside the city, a quiet lake surrounded by pine trees. We'd spent dozens of mornings there when she was in middle school, sitting on the dock with our lines in the water, talking about everything and nothing. Emma barely looked up from her phone. "I'm too old for that, Dad," she said, with a tone that made it clear she thought the suggestion was ridiculous. The words stung, but I forced a smile. "You're never too old to spend time with your old man," I joked. She just shrugged and went back to scrolling through her screen. I suggested other things. "Maybe we could catch a movie together," I said. There was a new comedy playing that looked funny. "I'll think about it," Emma replied, but she never brought it up again. I asked about her friends, whether she'd reconnected with anyone from high school. "Yeah, some people," she answered vaguely, offering no details. I wanted to know what was happening in her life. Was she applying for jobs? Had she gotten any interviews? What kind of work was she hoping to find? But every time I asked, Emma's answers were short and dismissive. "I'm working on it, Dad. It's harder than you think. I'm doing my best." So I tried showing my love in other ways. I noticed Emma mentioned wanting a new laptop because hers was running slow. I knew how important technology was for job applications and staying connected. So I saved up and bought her a nice one for her birthday. It wasn't cheap, nearly $800, but I wanted her to have the tools she needed. When I gave it to her, she opened the box, said, "Oh, thanks," and took it upstairs. No hug, no real appreciation in her voice, just a flat acknowledgement. I bought her favorite snacks when I went grocery shopping, the fancy coffee she liked that cost twice as much as the regular kind, the specific brand of yogurt she preferred. I'd stock the fridge, hoping these small gestures would show her I was paying attention, that I cared. But Emma would eat them without comment, as if they simply appeared by magic. The distance grew wider. Emma started criticizing things I said or did. When I'd mentioned something about my work day, she'd roll her eyes. If I expressed an opinion about news or politics, she'd sigh heavily and say, "That's such an outdated way of thinking, Dad." When I tried to offer advice about her job search, she'd snap, "I didn't ask for your opinion." I kept telling myself this was just a phase. Young adults figuring out their independence often pushed away from their parents. I'd read articles about it, talked to other fathers at work who had adult children living at home. They all said the same thing. Give it time. Be patient. She'll come around. But patience was getting harder, especially when I noticed that Emma wasn't really trying to find work. She'd sleep until noon most days. I'd leave for work at 6 in the morning, and she'd still be asleep. When I'd come home at 6 in the evening, she'd be on the couch in her pajamas, watching television, or scrolling through social media on her phone. The expensive laptop I'd bought her sat mostly unused. Sarah made excuses. "She's depressed, Vernon. The job market is tough right now. She needs our support, not pressure." I understood that. I did. But support didn't mean enabling someone to do nothing all day, did it? I wanted to help Emma, but I also wanted her to help herself. The criticisms from Emma became sharper, more personal. One evening I came home from work, still wearing my construction boots and dusty work pants. I'd had a long day pouring concrete, and I was exhausted. Emma was in the living room with one of her friends I didn't recognize. As I walked past, I heard her say to her friend, "God, my dad dresses like he's from the 80s. It's so embarrassing." I stopped in the hallway, unsure if I'd heard correctly. Her friend giggled awkwardly. I looked down at my clothes. Sure, they weren't fashionable. I wore practical work boots, jeans, and plain t-shirts because that's what made sense for my job. I never thought about being stylish. I thought about being functional. I didn't say anything. I just continued to my bedroom, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed. Sarah was grading papers at her desk in the corner. "Did you hear that?" I asked quietly. She glanced up. "Hear what?" I shook my head. "Nothing. Never mind." Emma's disrespect grew bolder. During family dinners, the few times we managed to all sit down together, Emma would be on her phone. I'd try to start a conversation, ask about her day, and she'd respond with one-word answers without looking up. If I persisted, she'd make an exaggerated sighing sound, as if my mere presence was exhausting to endure. One night I was telling Sarah about a complicated project at work. We were building a new community center, and there had been some challenges with the foundation. I was explaining the problem and how we'd solved it when Emma interrupted. "Dad, literally no one cares about concrete." She said it so casually, so dismissively, like my career, my work, my entire professional life was boring and worthless. Sarah gave her a mild look. "Emma, that's not nice." But there was no real force behind it. Emma just shrugged and went back to her phone. I felt something crack inside my chest, but I swallowed it down and finished my dinner in silence. What made it worse was that Emma wasn't contributing anything to the household. I'm not just talking about money, though that was part of it. She wasn't helping with chores. Sarah and I both worked full-time jobs. I was doing physical labor for 10 hours a day. Sarah was teaching kindergarteners, which was mentally and emotionally draining. We'd come home tired, and the house would be a mess. Dishes piled in the sink. Emma's laundry scattered across the bathroom. Empty food containers left on the coffee table. I'd ask Emma if she could help out a little. Maybe wash the dishes after she used them. Maybe throw in a load of laundry once in a while. She'd agree in the moment, but never actually do it. If I brought it up again, she'd get defensive. "I'm going through a hard time, Dad. I'm dealing with a lot. You don't understand the pressure I'm under." What pressure, I wanted to shout. You sleep until noon. You don't have a job. You're not in school. What exactly is so stressful? But I bit my tongue because Sarah would give me that look that said, "Don't make this worse." Sarah always defended Emma. Every single time. If I expressed frustration, Sarah would say, "She needs time to figure things out." If I suggested Emma should be doing more to help around the house, Sarah would say, "She's stressed. We need to be supportive." I felt like I was the only one who saw what was really happening. Emma was taking advantage of us, and Sarah was enabling it. The financial burden was entirely on my shoulders. I paid the mortgage. I paid the utilities. I bought all the groceries. I paid for the internet that Emma used for hours every day. I covered the insurance on the car, that Emma drove my old Honda, that I'd planned to drive until it died. Emma had taken it over, using it to meet friends, to go shopping, to drive wherever she wanted, and she never once put gas in it. I'd get in the car to go to work and see the fuel gauge on empty, forcing me to stop and fill up on my way, making me late. I was 54 years old. My back hurt constantly from years of manual labor. I had chronic pain in my knees from all the kneeling and climbing I did at work. I'd developed headaches that my doctor said were stress-related. Every morning it was harder to get out of bed. Every evening I came home feeling like I'd been beaten, and nobody noticed. Nobody asked if I was okay. Nobody thanked me for the work I was doing to keep the household running. I felt like a machine expected to just keep functioning without maintenance, without appreciation, without care. I started having this recurring thought as I'd drive home from work. I'd be sitting in traffic, my whole body aching, and I'd think, what am I doing this for? I'd given everything to my family. I'd sacrificed my health, my time, my dreams. And for what? To be treated like I was invisible, to be mocked and dismissed and taken for granted. I felt desperately alone. The worst kind of loneliness, the kind where you're surrounded by people who are supposed to love you, but you still feel completely unseen. I'd lie awake at night next to Sarah, listening to her breathe, and wonder when everything had gone so wrong. When had I become nothing more than a paycheck? When had my daughter started looking at me with contempt instead of love? But I kept going, because that's what you do, right? You keep showing up. You keep working. You keep hoping that things will get better. I told myself that Emma would eventually find her footing. She'd get a job, move out, and maybe then she'd appreciate everything I'd done. Maybe then she'd realize that I'd only ever wanted the best for her. I held on to that hope like a lifeline. But hope was getting harder to maintain. Friday, October 18th. That was the day everything changed. I can tell you the exact date because it's burned into my memory like a scar. I'd had one of the hardest weeks of my career. We were in the middle of a major project, renovating an old office building downtown. The schedule was tight, and we'd run into unexpected problems with the electrical system. I'd worked 12-hour days for 6 straight days, coming home exhausted and filthy, barely able to keep my eyes open long enough to eat dinner. That Friday morning, my supervisor told me we'd finally caught up. I could take the weekend off. I actually felt a surge of relief. 2 whole days to rest. Maybe I'd sleep in, take it easy, let my body recover. On the drive home, I even felt a little optimistic. Maybe I'd suggest we all do something together as a family. Maybe we could go out for breakfast on Saturday visit, that farmer's market Sarah used to love. When I got home, it was just after 6 in the evening. The house was quiet. Sarah's car was in the driveway, so I knew she was home. I found her in the living room, curled up on the couch with a book. She looked up when I walked in, and gave me a tired smile. "Long week?" she asked. I nodded. "The longest, but we're finally done with the worst of it." I went upstairs to shower, scrubbing away the grime and sweat. The hot water felt good on my sore muscles. I put on clean jeans and a comfortable flannel shirt. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I saw a 54-year-old man who looked older than his years. My hair was more grey than brown now. I had deep lines around my eyes and across my forehead. I looked worn down, and I felt it. I went down to the kitchen and decided to make dinner. I wanted to do something nice, something that might bring us together. I looked through the pantry and decided on spaghetti with meat sauce. It had been Emma's favorite meal when she was younger. She used to ask for it on her birthday every single year. I browned the ground beef, added onions and garlic, poured in the tomato sauce and seasonings. While that simmered, I made a salad chopping romaine lettuce, tomatoes, cucumbers. I sliced a baguette and brushed it with butter and garlic powder, then put it in the oven to toast. I even found some candles in the cabinet and placed them in the middle of the dining table, thinking it might create a nice atmosphere. By 7 o'clock, everything was ready. I called up the stairs. "Dinner's ready." Sarah came down first, looking pleasantly surprised. "You cooked that sweet Vernon." Emma appeared a few minutes later, her eyes fixed on her phone screen, thumbs moving rapidly as she texted someone. We sat down at the table. I'd served everyone's plate, putting a generous helping of pasta on each one. The garlic bread was warm in a basket in the center of the table. I lit the candles, and the soft glow actually did make the room feel cozier. For a moment, I allowed myself to hope this would be a good evening. Sarah took a bite and complimented the meal. "This is delicious, Vernon. Thank you for cooking." I smiled at her, grateful for the acknowledgement. Emma hadn't touched her food. She was still staring at her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. I tried to start a conversation. "So how was everyone's day?" Sarah talked a bit about her kindergarten class, about a little boy who'd finally learned to tie his shoes after weeks of practice. I listened, asked questions, engaged with what she was saying. Emma didn't look up. After Sarah finished, there was a pause. I turned to Emma. "How about you, sweetheart? How was your day?" No response. She was completely absorbed in her phone. I waited a few seconds, then tried again. "Emma." She glanced up briefly, annoyance flickering across her face. "What? I was just asking about your day. Did you do anything interesting?" She looked back at her phone. "Not really." I persisted, hoping to draw her into the conversation. "Did you hear back from any of the jobs you applied for?" It was a gentle question, not accusatory, just showing interest. Emma's jaw tightened. "No, Dad, I didn't. The job market sucks right now, in case you haven't noticed." "I know it's tough," I said carefully. "I just want to help if I can. Maybe I could look over your resume, or I could ask around at work if anyone knows of openings." "I don't need your help," Emma said flatly. The room fell quiet, except for the sound of Sarah's fork against her plate. I felt the familiar sting of rejection, but pushed forward. "I made spaghetti tonight, your favorite. I thought we could have a nice family dinner together." Emma finally looked at me. Really looked at me, and her expression was cold. "Can you just stop talking, Dad? I'm trying to text my friend." Something in my chest tightened. "Emma, we're having dinner. Can you please put the phone down for a few minutes?" Her eyes narrowed. "God, you're so annoying." I took a breath, trying to keep my voice calm. "I just think we should spend some time together as a family. I worked all week and I thought it would be nice to—" Emma suddenly slammed her hand down on the table. The plates rattled. The candles flickered. Sarah jumped slightly in her seat. "Shut up, Dad!" Emma shouted. Her face was flushed with anger. "Nobody cares about your work. Nobody cares for you." The words hit me like a physical blow. Time seemed to slow down. I sat there frozen, staring at my daughter. The daughter I'd read bedtime stories to for 15 years. The daughter I'd taught to ride a bike. The daughter I'd worked myself to exhaustion for sacrificing everything to give her opportunities and comfort. Nobody cares for you. The silence that followed was deafening. I looked at Sarah, waiting for her to say something to defend me, to tell Emma that what she'd said was cruel and unacceptable. But Sarah just sat there, her eyes downcast, saying nothing. She didn't stand up for me. She didn't correct our daughter. She just sat in silence, and somehow that hurt even more than Emma's words. I looked back at Emma. She'd already returned her attention to her phone, as if the outburst had never happened, as if she hadn't just told her father that nobody cared about him, as if those words hadn't just destroyed something fundamental inside me. In that moment, sitting at that table, with the cooling spaghetti and the flickering candles, memories flooded my mind. Emma, at 5 years old, running into my arms when I picked her up from kindergarten, shouting, "Daddy, with pure joy." Emma at 10, holding my hand as we walked through the zoo, asking me a million questions about every animal we saw. Emma at 16, crying on my shoulder after her first heartbreak, and me holding her while she sobbed, promising her that she'd find someone worthy of her someday. And now Emma at 29 telling me nobody cared for me. Something inside me went very still and very quiet. It wasn't anger, exactly. It was clarity. A sudden absolute understanding that I could not continue living like this. I could not continue being invisible in my own home. I could not continue giving everything to people who saw me as nothing. I stood up. The chair scraped against the floor. Sarah's head snapped up, her eyes wide. "Vernon." I didn't answer her. I walked out of the dining room, my movements calm and deliberate. I went to the small table near the front door, where I always left my keys. I picked them up. The metal felt cool and solid in my palm. I took my jacket from the coat rack. It was my old brown leather jacket, worn soft from years of use. As I shrugged it on, I heard Sarah's footsteps behind me. "Vernon, where are you going?" I turned to look at her. My wife of 32 years, the woman I'd loved and provided for, and stood by through everything. "I need some air, Sarah," I said quietly. "I'll be back." But even as the words left my mouth, I knew they were a lie. I wasn't coming back. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. Sarah's face showed confusion and concern, but not understanding. She didn't get it. She didn't see what had just happened, what had been happening for years. "It's late, Vernon. Where are you going?" I didn't answer. I opened the front door and stepped out into the October evening. The air was cool and crisp, and I pulled the jacket tighter around me. Behind me I heard Sarah call my name again, but I didn't turn around. I walked to my truck, the old Ford I'd owned for 12 years. I got in, started the engine, and sat there for a moment, my hands on the steering wheel. The house was lit up behind me. I could see Sarah standing in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the light from inside. I put the truck in reverse and backed out of the driveway. As I drove away, I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I didn't let myself see the house getting smaller behind me. I just drove. I drove through our neighborhood, past houses I'd seen every day for decades. The Johnsons' place with the big oak tree in the front yard. The Martinez family's house with the elaborate Christmas decorations they put up every year. These streets had been my world, my home territory. And suddenly, they felt foreign. Tears started streaming down my face without warning. I wasn't sobbing, wasn't making any sound. The tears just came hot and steady, blurring my vision until I had to pull over into a gas station parking lot. I put the truck in park and sat there crying silently in the dim glow of the fluorescent lights. I thought about everything I'd given, every sacrifice I'd made, every dream I'd deferred. When I was young, I'd wanted to start my own construction company. I'd had plans, ambitions. But then Emma was born, and I needed steady income and health insurance, so I took the job with the firm and stayed there for 28 years. I'd wanted to travel to see places beyond Oregon, but family vacations to Crater Lake were all we could afford, so I never saw the ocean or the mountains I'd dreamed about. I'd given up friendships because I was always working or always tired. I'd given up hobbies because there was never time. I'd given up pieces of myself year after year, thinking I was building something beautiful. a family, a legacy, love. And what did I have to show for it? A daughter who thought nobody cared for me. A wife who wouldn't defend me. A body that hurt all the time from decades of hard labor. And a deep, aching loneliness that I'd been trying to ignore for years. I pulled out my phone. There were already 2 missed calls from Sarah. I stared at the screen, then opened my messages and typed, "I'm not coming back tonight. Don't worry about me." I didn't wait for a response. I turned the phone on, silent, and set it on the passenger seat. I drove for another 20 minutes, heading away from the city. I ended up at a small motel on the outskirts of town, the kind of place with neon signs and weekly rates advertised on a board out front. The Sunset Motor Lodge. It looked tired and worn, much like I felt. The woman at the front desk was in her 60s, with kind eyes and reading glasses hanging on a chain around her neck. "Room for the night?" she asked. "Yes, please." She didn't ask any questions, didn't comment on my red eyes or the defeated slump of my shoulders. She just processed my credit card and handed me a key attached to a green plastic tag with the number 17 on it. The room was basic. A queen bed with a faded floral bedspread, a television bolted to a dresser, a small bathroom with white tiles and fluorescent lighting. It smelled faintly of cleaning products and old cigarette smoke, though there was a prominent no smoking sign on the wall. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked around at this strange room that would be my home for the night. For the first time in 32 years, I wasn't sleeping in the house I'd worked so hard to pay for. I wasn't lying next to my wife. I wasn't under the same roof as my daughter. And the strangest part, I felt relief. A profound, overwhelming sense of relief. I lay back on the bed, still wearing my jeans and jacket, and stared at the water-stained ceiling. My mind was racing, but also strangely clear. I thought about what Sarah had said, or rather what she hadn't said. Her silence at that table had spoken volumes. She'd chosen Emma over me, just like she'd been doing for months, maybe years. I thought about Emma's face when she'd screamed at me. There hadn't been any remorse afterward, no shock at her own words. She'd just gone back to her phone as if nothing had happened. And that told me something important. This wasn't a one-time outburst. This was how she really felt about me. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I picked it up and saw 3 more missed calls from Sarah and several text messages. I opened them. "Vernon, please come home." I'm sorry about what Emma said. She didn't mean it. "You're scaring me. Where are you? Please just talk to me." But I didn't want to talk. What was there to say? That I was hurt. That I felt used and unappreciated. I'd tried expressing those feelings before, and nothing had changed. Words wouldn't fix this. This was broken in a way that couldn't be repaired with a conversation. I typed one message back. "I'm fine. I'm safe. I just need some time." Then I turned the phone completely off. I took a long shower in that small motel bathroom, letting the hot water run until it started to cool. I washed away the day, the week, the years. When I got out and looked at myself in the steamy mirror, I saw a man I barely recognized. When had I gotten so old? When had the light gone out of my eyes? I climbed into the motel bed in just my t-shirt and boxers. The sheets were scratchy and smelled like industrial detergent. But as I pulled the thin blanket up and closed my eyes, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. I felt free. I woke up the next morning to sunlight streaming through the thin curtains. For a moment I was disoriented, not recognizing my surroundings. Then it all came back. The dinner, Emma's words, my decision to leave. I checked my phone after turning it back on. 14 missed calls, 23 text messages, most from Sarah, a couple from numbers I didn't recognize that were probably Emma using friends' phones, since I hadn't saved her number in my recent contacts. I didn't read them. I couldn't face that yet. Instead, I got dressed and walked to a small diner I'd noticed across the street from the motel. It was one of those classic American diners, with red vinyl booths and a long counter with spinning stools. A waitress who looked like she'd been working there since the place opened poured me coffee without asking and handed me a laminated menu. I ordered eggs, bacon, and toast. Simple food. When it arrived, I ate slowly, savoring each bite. Nobody was rushing me. Nobody needed anything from me. I was just a man having breakfast, and it felt almost revolutionary. After I paid the bill, I sat in my truck in the diner parking lot and made a decision. I wasn't going back. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. I needed to figure out who I was, outside of being Vernon the provider, Vernon the fixer, Vernon the invisible man. I drove around town looking at apartment listings on my phone. Most places wanted a year lease and deposits I'd have to save up for. But then I found a small studio apartment in a complex on the east side of the city. The landlord was willing to do a month-to-month rental. It wasn't much, just one room with a kitchenette and a bathroom, but it was available immediately. I met with the landlord that afternoon. His name was Frank, a retired postal worker with a firm handshake. He showed me the apartment. It was on the second floor, maybe 400 square feet total. The carpet was beige and worn. The walls were white and bare. There was a small window that looked out over the parking lot. "I'll take it," I said. Frank raised an eyebrow. "Don't you want to think about it? Check out other places?" "No, this is good." He shrugged and pulled out the paperwork. I signed the lease and wrote him a check for the first month's rent and deposit. He handed me 2 keys on a plain metal ring. "Welcome home," Frank said. Home. The word felt strange, but also right. I spent the next few days in that motel room while I waited for my move-in date. I went to work each day as usual. I told my supervisor I was dealing with some family issues, but everything was fine. He didn't pry, and I was grateful. On my lunch breaks, I went to thrift stores and bought basic furniture. A futon that could serve as both couch and bed. A small table with 2 chairs, some pots and pans, plates and silverware. A lamp. Everything I needed to function, nothing more. Sarah continued calling and texting. Her messages shifted from worried to angry to pleading. "This is ridiculous, Vernon. Come home so we can talk. You're being childish. Emma said she was sorry. How long are you going to keep this up? People are asking where you are. What am I supposed to tell them?" I responded only once. "Tell them I'm taking care of myself for a change." 3 weeks after I left, I moved into my apartment. I carried my few belongings up the stairs myself. It didn't take long. I didn't have much because I hadn't gone back to the house to get anything. I'd bought new clothes, new toiletries, everything fresh and mine alone. That first night in my own place, I sat on my futon and looked around at the empty walls, the bare space. It was quiet. So quiet I could hear my own breathing. And in that quiet I felt a peace I hadn't experienced in years. I started establishing routines. I woke up at 5:30 each morning, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I'd put on running shoes and go for a walk through the neighborhood. Sometimes I'd jog a little, though my knees would protest. The important thing was being outside, moving my body, because I chose to, not because work demanded it. I discovered a coffee shop about 3 blocks from my apartment. It was a small place called Morning Brew, owned by a young couple who'd recently moved from California. They made excellent coffee and had pastries that reminded me of the ones my grandmother used to make when I was a kid. I became a regular, stopping in every morning after my walk. The owner, a woman named Jennifer, with bright red hair and an easy smile, started knowing my order without asking. Medium dark roast, black, and a blueberry scone. We'd chat while she made my coffee. She told me about the challenges of running a small business. I told her about construction projects around the city. These were simple, pleasant conversations with no weight behind them. I joined a local fishing club that met on Saturday mornings. I hadn't been fishing in years, not since Emma had stopped wanting to go with me. The club had about 15 regular members, mostly men my age or older. We'd meet at different spots around the area, spend a few hours with our lines in the water, talking or not talking, whatever felt right. One of the members was a man named George. He was 62, retired from teaching high school math. He had this weathered face and laugh lines around his eyes. We ended up fishing next to each other one Saturday, and he asked me the question nobody else had. "So what's your story, Vernon?" I surprised myself by telling him. Not everything, but enough. I told him about working hard my whole life for my family. About my daughter coming home after college and slowly turning into someone I didn't recognize. About the dinner that changed everything. George listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment, watching his line bob in the water. Then he said, "You did the right thing, Vernon. Sometimes walking away is the only way to save yourself." "You think so?" I asked. "I know so. I stayed in a marriage for 43 years that made me miserable. Told myself I was doing the noble thing, keeping the family together. You know what happened? My kids grew up thinking that's what love looks like. Sacrifice and resentment. They're all in unhappy relationships now, repeating the pattern. If I could go back, I'd have left sooner. I'd have shown them that it's okay to choose yourself." His words settled into me like stones in still water. I started seeing a therapist. Her name was Dr. Patterson, and her office was in a converted house near downtown. She was in her 50s with grey streaked hair she wore in a loose bun. Her office smelled like lavender and had soft lighting that made it feel safe. In our first session, she asked me to tell her why I was there. I talked for 45 minutes straight, barely pausing for breath. I told her everything. About Emma, about Sarah, about feeling invisible and used and utterly exhausted. When I finished, I realized I was crying. Dr. Patterson handed me a box of tissues and waited while I composed myself. Then she said, "Vernon, when was the last time you did something just for yourself? Not for work, not for your family. Just for you?" I couldn't answer. I literally could not think of a single thing. "That's what we're going to work on," she said gently. "You've spent your whole life being what other people needed. Now we're going to figure out who you are when nobody's asking anything of you." Over the following weeks and months, Dr. Patterson taught me about boundaries, about the difference between being loving and being a doormat, about how you can't pour from an empty cup. She helped me see that my pattern of endless giving hadn't actually helped my family. It had enabled them to take me for granted. "Love isn't about sacrifice alone," she told me in one session. "Real love requires mutual respect. It requires both people to see and value each other. What you had wasn't love. It was a one-sided transaction." 4 months after I left, Sarah found my apartment. I don't know how. Maybe she hired someone to track me down, or maybe she'd followed me from work one day. I came home on a Tuesday evening to find her sitting on the steps outside my building. She looked older than I remembered. Tired. There were new lines around her mouth, and she'd stopped coloring her hair. The grey was showing through. "Hi, Vernon," she said quietly. "Sarah." I kept my voice neutral. "Can we talk?" I looked at her for a long moment. Part of me, the part that remembered 32 years together, wanted to invite her up. But I'd worked too hard on building this new life to risk it. "Out here is fine." She flinched at that, but nodded. We sat on the steps, a careful distance between us. "Emma feels terrible," Sarah started. "She's been crying almost every day. She knows what she said was wrong." "Does she?" I asked. "Or does she just feel bad because I left?" Sarah didn't answer that. "I got a job," she continued. "Emma, I mean. She's working at a marketing firm downtown. She moved out last month, got a place with a roommate." "That's good," I said, and I meant it. I wanted Emma to be independent and successful. I just didn't want to be her emotional punching bag anymore. "She wants to see you," Sarah said. "She's asked me to tell you that." "I'm not ready for that." Sarah turned to look at me directly. Her eyes were wet. "Vernon, how long are you going to punish us?" The question made anger flash through me, hot and quick. "Punish you, Sarah? I'm not punishing anyone. I'm protecting myself." "From your own family?" "Yes." The word came out louder than I intended. I lowered my voice. "Yes, from my own family. Because for years you and Emma made me feel worthless. I worked myself to the bone. I gave everything I had. And it was never enough. I was never enough. Emma told me nobody cared for me, and you sat there and said nothing. You didn't defend me. You didn't stand up for me. You just let her say those things." Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks. I didn't know what to say. I was shocked. "You should have said that it wasn't okay. You should have told her she was wrong. You should have shown her that treating people that way has consequences." I stood up. "I can't do this anymore, Sarah. I can't be the person everyone takes from and nobody gives to. I'm 55 years old and I'm tired." "So that's it?" she asked, her voice breaking. 32 years, and you just walk away." "I didn't walk away from 32 years," I said quietly. "I walked away from being invisible. There's a difference." I went inside and left her sitting on those steps. I didn't look back. Later that night, lying on my futon in the dark, I let myself feel the grief of it. The end of my marriage. The fracture with my daughter. The life I'd built, and then abandoned. I cried hard and long, the kind of crying that leaves you empty and exhausted. But when morning came, I got up. I went for my walk. I stopped at morning brew. I went to work. I kept living, kept moving forward, kept choosing myself. It's been 2 years now since that Friday night dinner. I'm 56 years old, and my life looks nothing like I thought it would at this age. I still live in the same small apartment. I've added a few things to make it more comfortable. Some plants that sit on the windowsill, photographs on the walls, but they're mostly landscapes and pictures of places I want to visit someday. I have a better coffee maker now, a comfortable reading chair. My space is small, but it's entirely mine, and I've learned that matters more than square footage. Work is still work, but I've made some changes there too. I stopped saying yes to every overtime opportunity. I use my vacation days now. Last year I took a week and drove down the coast to California by myself. I stayed in cheap motels and ate at roadside diners, and watched the ocean for hours. It was the best trip of my life. The fishing club has become important to me. Those Saturday mornings with the guys, we don't talk about anything deep most of the time. We discuss fish and weather and sports. But there's a camaraderie there, a quiet understanding. These are men who show up for each other without expecting anything in return. George has become a genuine friend. We grab dinner, sometimes shoot pool at a local bar. Simple pleasures. I'm healthier than I've been in years. The chronic headaches are mostly gone. My back still hurts sometimes, but I've learned to manage it better. I do stretches every morning that Dr. Patterson recommended. I eat better because I'm cooking for myself and actually paying attention to what goes into my body. I've lost 20 pounds without trying. My relationship with Sarah is complicated. We're not divorced, but we're not really together either. We exist in this strange in-between space. We talk occasionally, mostly about practical matters. She wants me to come home. She says she understands now, that she's sorry. But I'm not convinced that anything would really be different, and I'm not willing to risk the peace I've built to find out. Emma and I have had some contact. About 6 months after I left, she sent me a long email. A real apology this time, not the hollow kind Sarah had reported. She wrote about realizing how selfish she'd been, how she'd been depressed, and took it out on the people who loved her most. She thanked me for everything I'd done for her over the years. She said she understood why I left, and that she didn't blame me. I wrote back. I told her I loved her, that I always would, but that I needed her to understand something. Being a parent doesn't mean accepting disrespect. It doesn't mean being a doormat. I told her that if we were going to rebuild our relationship, it had to be on new terms, mutual respect, both of us seeing each other as whole people. We've been meeting for coffee once a month. Neutral territory, time-limited visits. She tells me about her job, her apartment, her life. I tell her about fishing club and my therapy sessions and the books I've been reading. It's not the relationship we used to have, and it never will be. But it's honest in a way. The old relationship wasn't. She's growing up, I think. Really growing up, not just getting older. She pays her own bills now. She's learning what it means to be responsible for herself. I see glimpses of the person I always hoped she'd become. Whether we'll ever be close again, I don't know. But I'm open to the possibility. I've learned so much in these 2 years. I've learned that loving yourself isn't selfish. I've learned that you can't save people who don't want to be saved. I've learned that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for everyone involved is to leave. I've learned about boundaries, real boundaries that you actually enforce. I've learned to say no without guilt. I've learned that my worth isn't determined by how useful I am to other people. Most importantly, I've learned that it's never too late to start over. At 54, sitting in that motel room, I thought my life was essentially over. I thought I'd made my choices, and now I just had to live with them. But I was wrong. Every day is a choice. Every day you can choose differently. I don't hate Emma or Sarah. I really don't. I understand that they were dealing with their own struggles, their own pain. Emma was lost and scared about her future. Sarah was caught between her husband and her daughter. I can have compassion for them, while also acknowledging that their actions hurt me deeply. But I also don't regret leaving. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, walking out of that house. Harder than any day of physical labor, harder than any sacrifice I made over 30 years. But it was also the most necessary thing. Because in choosing to leave, I chose life. I chose myself. And for the first time in decades, I started living instead of just existing. I think about that night sometimes, sitting at the dinner table with cold spaghetti and flickering candles. Emma's words echoing in the quiet room. Nobody cares for you. In that moment, she was wrong, because I cared for me. And that turned out to be enough. My retirement plan looks different now. I'm saving money in a way I never could before because I'm only supporting myself. In 10 years, I want to travel. Really travel, not just drive down the coast. I want to see the mountains I dreamed about as a young man. I want to visit places I've only read about in books. I'm dating someone casually. Her name is Anne, and she's a librarian. We met at a community event and discovered we both love mystery novels. We go to movies together, have dinner once or twice a week. It's comfortable and easy. She knows my story, and she has her own complicated past. We're both damaged in ways, but we're both working on healing. Neither of us is rushing into anything serious. We're just enjoying each other's company. Life is quieter now, simpler. Some people might look at my small apartment and my modest lifestyle and think I've lost everything. But those people would be wrong. I've actually gained something precious. I've gained myself back. If you're watching this and you see yourself in my story, if you're feeling invisible in your own home, unappreciated by the people you love most, I want you to hear this. Your feelings are valid. Your hurt is real. And you don't have to accept being treated as less than you deserve. Walking away doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make you selfish or cruel. Sometimes it's the only way to survive. Sometimes it's the only way to show the people in your life that there are consequences for how they treat others. I'm not saying everyone should leave their families. Every situation is different. But I am saying that you matter. Your well-being matters. Your mental health matters. And if you're constantly giving to people who only take something has to change, maybe it means having hard conversations. Maybe it means setting firm boundaries and actually enforcing them. Maybe it means walking away temporarily or permanently. Only you can decide what's right for your situation. But don't wait until you're completely broken. Don't wait until there's nothing left of who you used to be. Don't spend decades hoping that people will suddenly start appreciating you. They won't not unless something forces them to see what they're losing. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to be valued. You deserve to live a life where you're more than just a paycheck or a solution to everyone else's problems. You deserve to be loved in a way that fills you up instead of draining you dry. It's never too late to choose yourself. I was 54 when I walked out of that house with my keys in my hand. I thought my life was over. But it was just beginning. The real beginning. The one where I finally mattered to the person who should have mattered all along. Myself. So take your keys. Drive toward your own happiness. Choose yourself. You're worth it. Now I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever felt invisible in your own home? Have you had to make a difficult choice to protect yourself? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else who's struggling with the same decision. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel for more real-life stories about finding yourself, setting boundaries, and choosing to live authentically. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes we all need a reminder that we're worth fighting for. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for seeing me, even if my own family couldn't for a while. I hope you choose to see yourself too. May you find the courage to stand up for yourself. May you find peace in knowing your worth. And may you never forget that you deserve to be cared for just as much as you care for others. Take care of yourselves out there. You're worth it.